Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Connolly, and members of the committee. As mayor of New York City and a former police officer for 22 years, keeping New Yorkers safe is my top priority, and it has been our administration's North Star. When I entered this role, my job was to help our city recover from the negative effects of COVID. Most importantly, to bring down crime. As a result, overall crime was down across New York City last year, and we have now had 3 straight months of double-digit declines in major crimes. I'm here today to testify on how New York City can continue to reduce crime, even as a sanctuary city. To be clear, a sanctuary city classification does not mean our city will ever be a safe haven for violent criminals. It also does not give New York City the authority to violate federal immigration laws. To the contrary, New York City will always comply with city, state, and federal laws as it does now. Law-abiding immigrants in New York have an important role. Immigrant New Yorkers, including those who are undocumented, pay billions of dollars in taxes and contribute billions more in spending power to our economy. Immigrants also play a vital role in the functioning of the city. This was on full display during the COVID-19 pandemic. The various immigrant residents of our city worked to keep the city moving, while many other New Yorkers were able to shelter in place and work remotely. Hospitals, the food industry, and many other businesses were able to function because of the commitment of our immigrant population. As mayor, I do not control who enters or remains in our country, but I do have to manage the population that is within our city. In order to carry out this function without having long-term negative ramification, I must create an atmosphere that allows every law-abiding resident, documented or not, to access vital services without fear of being turned over to federal authorities. I cannot have a city where parents are afraid to send their children to school or where children are sleeping on the streets, creating the potential for child exploitation and sex trafficking. If an undocumented person refuses to seek medical care until they have a medical emergency, our city's healthcare system will be strained. And if an undocumented individual witnesses a crime but is afraid to call 911 for fear of being turned over to federal authorities, criminals will roam free. And it reminds me of my early days as a police officer. I have seen firsthand the damage that can be done when someone is too afraid to seek out the police. Early in my career, I responded to a man who was calling out for help. We caught the suspect, but when it came to filling out the police report, the individual, an undocumented man from China, said he did not want to file a report and put a target on his back with federal immigration authorities. Approximately 4 decades later, our country still is in desperate need of comprehensive immigration reform. And as a result, New York City was hit with the largest humanitarian crisis in our city's history over the last 3 years. Federal law did not allow me to stop buses from entering New York City. State law required me to provide all in our city with housing and meals and to educate children. City law makes it unlawful to collaborate with ICE for civil enforcement. We complied with all of these legal requirements and still manage the humanitarian crisis with the care and compassion, while at the same time bringing down crime, recovering our economy, and preventing any child from being forced to sleep on the streets. Comprehensive immigration reform is long overdue. While the solution is not within my control as a mayor, I am committed to working with federal officials to go after violent gangs and those who harm residents of our city. This is why we have over 330 NYPD officers assigned to different federal joint task forces, over 70 of which are assigned to task forces with Homeland Security investigation, the criminal investigation arm of ICE. Those task forces focus on many different important priorities, including going after violent gangs and child exploitation. I look forward to sharing New York City collaborations that we do daily with our city, state, and federal partners to keep New York City to continue to be the safest big city in America. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Denver Mayor Johnston for his opening statement.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for inviting me to testify today. This committee convened this hearing on the critical topic of immigration. I want to tell you Denver's story. When I became mayor 20 months ago, Denver was already receiving buses of immigrants with little to no notice or coordination. At one point, we were receiving 10 to 11 buses a day, dropping off as many as 300 people, mostly women and children, in 10-degree weather with only sandals and a T-shirt, leaving them in danger of freezing to death on our streets. All told, 42,000 people arrived in Denver over 18 months, the largest per capita influx of any city in America. We are each entitled to our own opinion about what should happen at the border, but that was not the question facing Denver. The question Denver faced was, what will you do with a mom and 2 kids dropped on the streets of our city with no warm clothes, no food, and no place to stay? As mayor, I have to protect the health and safety of everyone in our city. As a man of faith, I have a moral obligation to care for those in need. As Scripture says, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. So that's what we did. In Denver, we believe our problems are solvable, and we are the ones to solve them. So we went to work. When we started, we had the largest encampment in Denver history, with more than 200 migrant families living in freezing temperatures. So we opened 8 different city shelters housing 5,000 people. City employees volunteered to take extra shifts, and Denver residents stepped up, making meals, donating clothes, furniture, school supplies. Some even welcomed families into their own homes. We helped 8,700 eligible individuals apply for work authorization so they could put food on their own table, pay their own rent, and reduce the strain on public resources. As a result, a year later, there is not a single migrant encampment left in the city. We have closed all of our shelters. We have connected people to jobs and housing, and the city's immigrant support budget has dropped by nearly 90%. And in the midst of this, migrants did not bring a wave of crime to Denver. In fact, crime went down. Homicides dropped 17%, shooting victims dropped 24%, auto theft down 29%. America is not just a place, it's a belief. Some people are born into it. Some fight their whole life to get to it. It's a belief that all are created equal. It's a belief that it doesn't matter where you came from if you're willing to fight hard enough. Julian Becerra's parents believed that. So they brought him to this country from Mexico when he was 10. They taught him respect, and they taught him to love and serve his community. As an adult, he decided the most honorable way to serve his community was in uniform. So he enlisted in the Air Force. Then he served as a sheriff, then finally as a police officer, where he served with distinction until one day he was pursuing a criminal on a dangerous bridge and fell to his death. In the midst of the immigration crisis, I attended the Fallen Officers Memorial as I watched officers hand Officer Becerra's 10-year-old daughter a folded American flag. I watched her cry as she wrapped her little arms around that flag and holded it tight the way she wished she could hold her dad, but never will again. For the rest of her life, she will cherish that flag, that American flag, because it is the country that her dad loved, it is the country he chose, it is the country he served, it is the country he gave his life for. So if we want to tell the story of what impact immigrants have in America, we must tell the full story. That story must acknowledge that this country is lucky to have people like Julian Becerra, who love this country enough to risk their lives to keep us safe, to keep all of us safe. When buses started showing up filled with migrants, some in my city were afraid, just like I'm sure some of your constituents are afraid. They were afraid about crime and homelessness and worried about what these new people might take away from them. I understand that fear. And the truth is, people who are new to this country do good and bad just like all of us. But there's another truth. When those buses kept on coming, Denver made a choice as a city, not to hate each other, but to help each other. Not to turn on each other, but to turn to each other. And see if together we could solve a problem that felt bigger than any one of us. And that's what we did. It wasn't perfect, and it required sacrifice from all of us. But in the end, Denver came out stronger and closer than we were before. Because Americans expect us to do more than point fingers. They expect us to solve problems. So if Denver can find a way to put aside our ideological differences long enough to manage a crisis we didn't choose or create, it seems only fair to ask that the body that is actually charged with solving this national problem, this Congress, can finally commit to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize Chicago Mayor Johnston for his
Thank
opening
you.
statement.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. Thank you to the Ranking Member Connolly and to the members of this committee. I have the great privilege and honor of serving as mayor of the city of Chicago, the third largest city in the nation. Established by a black Haitian man and a Potawatomi woman, Chicago is and always has been a proud city of immigrants. Generations of new arrivals, including the descendants of the enslaved during the Great Migration, created a vibrant city where 1 in 5 residents is foreign-born. Each day I wake up to serve every one of Chicago's 77 unique neighborhoods and those who live in our great city. As mayor of Chicago, nothing is more important to me than the safety and well-being of all residents. And since I was elected, my administration has been laser-focused on creating and implementing public safety initiatives that protect all Chicagoans. We launched the People's Plan for Community Safety, which builds trust between communities and law enforcement by prioritizing transparency and violence intervention. We established a dedicated robbery task force that reduced robberies by 25% citywide. We added over 200 detectives, increasing the clearance rates on our cases. And we've updated police equipment and technology so that our police officers have the tools they need to effectively prevent and fight crime. Our efforts to improve public safety by building trust with and investing in our communities are working. Violent crime is down in Chicago. The city ended 2024 with its lowest homicide rate in 5 years. The city is also safer because of our Welcoming City Ordinance. That law makes sure that the city's police resources are focused on our local priorities. In fact, the 40 years of Chicago's leaders have recognized that our policies toward civil immigration matters help to prevent and solve crimes. Put simply, any actions that amplify fears of deportations make Chicago more dangerous. Those fears cause witnesses and victims to avoid cooperating with police. The cooperation of all people, regardless of their immigration status, is essential to achieving the city's goals of reducing crime and pursuing justice for victims. When there is trust between city's residents and the police, undocumented immigrants come forward to report crimes to local law enforcement and provide information that helps the police solve those crimes. And now, I know there are myths about these laws, but we must not let mischaracterizations and fear-mongering obscure the reality that Chicago's crime rates are trending down. We still have a long way to go, but sensationalizing tragedy in the name of political expediency is not governing, it's grandstanding. Every violent crime is devastating, but scapegoating entire communities is not only misleading, it is unjust and it is beneath us. So let me be clear. Chicago's Welcoming City Ordinance and our other laws and policies do not lead to more crime. They do not prevent cooperation with federal law enforcement on criminal matters. And we do not harbor criminals. We arrest them, often because of laws that allow residents to feel safe helping the police. As mayor, I'm building a Chicago that embodies the dream of my father had when he came from Salis, Mississippi during the Second Migration, a Chicago that invests in housing, healthcare, jobs, and education. And that's why we've increased safe and stable housing by adding almost 4,000 more units, expanded access to health care by opening 3 mental health centers, and focused on getting our young people well-paying jobs, with summer jobs increasing by 45% since I've taken office. Our local partnerships have built a solid foundation, a better, stronger, and a much safer Chicago. We need this body's support for these efforts. We are ready to partner with you on the measures we know promote trust and create sustainable public safety. And to the people of Chicago and all hardworking people across this great nation, these values are our North Star, the drinking gourd we follow to a better future. We will not live in fear. It is not our portion. We will not go back. I do look forward to answering the questions of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Boston Mayor Wu for her opening statement.
Thank you. Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Connolly, and members of the committee, my name is Michelle Wu. I am the daughter of immigrants, and since November of 2021, I have had the honor of serving as mayor of Boston. I'm proud to be here on behalf of our city, the police officers, first responders, city workers, the faith leaders, teachers, parents, and neighbors who partner every day to make Boston the safest major city in the nation. And I'm proud every day to work alongside the greatest police commissioner in the nation, Commissioner Michael Cox. Every year since I took office, we've set a new record low for gun violence in Boston. Last year, Boston saw the fewest homicides on record in the last 70 years. Those are the facts. And behind these record lows are historic highs. The most ever young people working paid summer jobs, the most pre-K seats at no cost to families, the most affordable housing built in a generation. We have invested in the kinds of opportunities that cultivate prosperity and eradicate crime. And the laws on our books promote the kind of community trust that keeps all of us safe. In Boston, our police department resources and taxpayer dollars go towards preventing and solving crimes. And when it comes to criminal matters, the Boston Police partner every day with state and federal law enforcement. But Massachusetts state law and the Boston Trust Act make clear that immigration is federal law enforcement's responsibility. We are the safest major city in the country because our gun laws are the strongest in the nation, because our officers have built relationships over decades, and because all of our residents can trust that when they call 911 in the event of an emergency or to report a crime, help will come. This federal administration's approach is undermining that trust. In the past month, I've met with residents and faith leaders in community centers and places of worship, asking my constituents what they want Congress to know. And what I heard over and over again was fear and frustration. I spoke with pastors whose pews are half empty on Sundays, doctors whose patients are missing appointments, teachers whose students aren't coming to class, neighbors afraid to report crimes in their communities, and victims of violence who won't call the police. This federal administration is making hardworking, tax-paying, God-fearing residents afraid to live their lives. A city that's scared is not a city that's safe. A land ruled by fear is not the land of the free. Next month, Boston will celebrate 250 years of our nation's freedom. And in every one of those years, Boston has welcomed the world to our shores. From the English immigrants fleeing religious persecution, to the Irish forced out by famine, to the families from Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cabo Verde, Vietnam, and so many more who call Boston home today. We are the safest major city in the nation. We are home to the greatest healthcare, the greatest colleges and universities, the most advanced innovators, and the 2024 world champion Boston Celtics. We are the cradle of democracy and the city of champions. We are all of these things not in spite of our immigrants, but because of them. 1 in 7 signers of the Declaration of Independence were immigrants. On the last 4 Red Sox rosters to win a World Series, 1 in 5 were immigrants. Of all the faculty at Boston University to have earned a Nobel Prize, all but 1 were immigrants. Today, 1 in 4 Boston residents were born somewhere else. Most have jobs, many have kids. All of them chose this country as their home because, like my mom and dad, they believe that here, where you've been doesn't limit where you're going. The strength of your character has nothing to do with the color of your passport. And how hard you work matters more than where you were born. That wherever you're from, if you pitch in, look out for your neighbors, and cheer for the home team, you can build a better future here for the people you love. So to every one of my neighbors back in Boston, know this: you belong here. This is your home. Boston es tu hogar. Boston, 这la calle, 这是你的家. This is our city. We are the safest major city in the nation because we are safe for everyone. Thank you.